The year was 1942, and the world was a battleground of bloodshed and tyranny. Adolf Hitler, the ruthless dictator of Germany, sought to establish a new racial order throughout Europe, and later the entire world. The world powers were split between two factions, the Allies and the Axis. The most recent addition to the Allies was the United States of America. Having been neutral until Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor, the US started to engage in the war efforts, mostly stationed in the Pacific Theater. During this period, there came a need to make an unbreakable code, one that couldn't be interpreted by the enemy, in order to safely communicate with allies and send across confidential information. Philip Johnston, a civilian, had the idea to recruit 29 Native American Navajo men in order to use their language as the code. These men were later recognized as the Navajo Code Talkers, and helped the Allies win World War II through their unique native language, and helped improve diplomatic relations between the US and Native Americans. In order to completely understand who the Code Talkers were or why they were needed, we must first immerse ourselves in the concept of code. We can do this by reviewing earlier forms of code used by world powers. For example, Enigma was a cipher device used by Nazi Germany's military command to transmit messages before and during World War II. The Enigma machine produced encoded messages. Electrical signals from a typewriter-like keyboard were transmitted through a series of rotating wheels, as well as a plug board that scrambled the output but did it in a way that was understandable with the right settings. The first time the code was broken was by the Poles, led by Marian Rejewski in the early 1930s. The British were using Typex. These Typex cipher machines were used from 1937 and were an adaptation of the German Enigma system, but with a few key enhancements that greatly improved its security over its counterpart. The German Enigma system required two operators to transmit messages, but the Typex system needed only one. The Typex system also avoided operator copying errors by printing down the deciphered code on paper tape. The Enigma system, however, needed to have the deciphered code written down, eventually proving inefficient. The Americans also used the cipher system. The type of code that they were using was called Morse code. This system used an arrangement of dots, dashes, and spaces to represent letters of the alphabet, numerals, and punctuation marks. This all changed because of one significant event, Pearl Harbor. Until 1941, the US was a neutral country and didn't engage in World War II. The Japanese Navy planned a surprise attack on the US naval base known as Pearl Harbor. Their goal was to prevent the US Pacific Fleet from interfering in their planned conquest to invade overseas territories of the Allied powers. This attack happened just before 8 a.m. on December 7, 1941, destroying more than 20 American vessels and 300 airplanes. There were more than 2,400 casualties and 1,000 wounded. The plan backfired, however, making it the catalyst for the US to join the war efforts. There were more than 16 million American soldiers sent to the Pacific Theater to fight against the Japanese. During this time, the standard Morse code used by the US Army proved inefficient and easily interpreted by the Japanese, causing the need for an unbreakable code. During this desperate time, every combatant in the war appreciated the need to find an unbreakable code in order to keep their operational plans safe. The US Marines knew exactly where to find the code and the people that could transmit them. These people were none other than the Navajo Nation. Philip Johnston, a US Marine and the son of a Navajo missionary, handpicked 29 Navajo men who could create a code based on the language. So why was this language different from any other language that could be learned and understood? Well, the Navajo language was unwritten, therefore making any and all transmission of the codes orally communicated. However, this was not a reason to call the language easy, as it had many tonal qualities that only a native could understand.
The message, the coded message, we cannot write it, but we can decipher it. All that code only exists in our mind.
The Navajo began constructing the code by taking words from the language and applying them to different war-related vocabulary. For example, the Navajo used names for birds when referring to planes. Such bird names translated to English include chicken hawk for dive bomber and hummingbird for fighter plane. The original code was made up of a whopping 211 vocabulary terms, which grew to over 400 during the later stages of the war. The code talkers were effectively utilized in every military operation involving the Marines in the Pacific Theater. Their main job was to transmit tactical information over telephone and radio. During the invasion of Iwo Jima, 6 Navajo code talkers were operating continuously and sent over 800 messages. All of these messages were even transmitted without error. Because of the status of minority races in the US at the time, many would be quick to assume that the Navajo code talkers were also prejudiced against. This was actually not the case, as they were treated with utmost respect by their Marine peers. However, despite all they had dedicated to their nation, the hard work of the Navajo Code Talkers was not publicly acknowledged until the declassification of the operation in 1968.
I'm very lucky to say that I came home safely. It was something that was very secret, and we couldn't talk about what we went through to our family. Everything was strictly secret.
President Ronald Reagan even gave the Code Talkers a certificate of recognition. As tribute to the great warriors that used their language to aid our country, August 14th was declared Navajo Code Talkers Day in 1982. In the year 2000, President Bill Clinton signed a law which awarded the Congressional Gold Medal to the 29 original Code Talkers. In July of 2001, President George W. Bush presented the medals to the 4 surviving Code Talkers at a ceremony held in the Capitol.
Today, America honors 29 Native Americans who, in a desperate hour, gave their country a service only they could give. In war, using their native language, they relayed secret messages that turned the course of battle. At home, they carried for decades the secret of their own heroism. Today, we give these exceptional Marines the recognition they earned so long ago.
Historians argue that the Navajo Code Talkers expedited the end of the war and undoubtedly saved thousands of lives in the process. The Navajo Code Talkers also undoubtedly improved relations between the U.S. and Native Americans. When word of what the Code Talkers had contributed spread across the country, many civilians of Navajo heritage rejoiced with a newfound sense of pride, knowing that the Navajo language played an important role in winning World War II. The Navajo Code Talkers proved that anybody can fight for their country and do what's right.
All of us Code Talkers received Silver Congressional Medal.
It's nice to be recognized, but there's one big thing missing. The rest of the Code Talkers who never made it home, say thank you to them and their family for making that sacrifice.
Today, the Navajo language is one of the most widely spoken Native American languages, with almost 170,000 Americans speaking it at home. When all is said and done, it is an undisputed fact that the Navajo Code Talkers played a big part in the Allies winning World War II. When the U.S. Marines were desperate to find skilled people who could transmit an unbreakable code, these 29 brave men stepped up for their country in order to fight for the greater good. They provided a service that nobody else could provide and cemented themselves in history and the hearts of the American people. On top of all of this, they provided this honorable service without even getting the recognition they deserved, until 20 years later. If fighting in World War II wasn't enough, they were utilized in many more wars after. The one thing we, as observers of history, can do is to take away teaching for ourselves. The Code Talkers proved that heroes can come from unlikely places, and that to be strong, we must stay united.
War is something that nobody wants. It's bad, it's ugly. But so long as we are together, no matter what nationality you are, if you are American and love this country, we all have to stick together to keep this nation strong. Our freedom and liberty means so much, meant so much for those who never made it home.